I'm joined here now by author Meg Hafdahl. Now, for our viewers who may not know too much about you, I'll get you just to go a little bit into your background.
I am a writer. I am the author of novels. I have three novels. I have three short story collections. I am a podcaster. I'm a screenplay writer, but all of it focuses on what I call female driven suspense and horror. I love scary stuff, but I also love writing complicated female characters. So I also write nonfiction about horror films because I kind of have that bug to research, and I love what not only watching horror movies but learning more about them. So I have a whole series called Science of Series that I write as well. So that's what I do.
And where do you get a lot of your inspiration from for your horror writings or just, your writings and stuff in general?
Yeah, so well, I as a kid I absorbed so much horror. I loved it. I loved the films. I loved reading Stephen King or any horror writer. But I kind of get it in everyday life, which sounds crazy because I write about, monsters and supernatural stuff. But I like to sort of start with a character that has an issue that, anyone might have, whether it be they're sort of struggling through motherhood or they're struggling with, maybe an eating disorder or they're addicted to something. And I like to sort of put them in these situations where they have to sink or swim. And I like watching characters on sort of like the worst day of their lives. Because horror stories is kind of, they're basically the worst thing that's going to happen to this character, right? So that's kind of what I like to do, experiment on them.
And you also have three different Twisted Reverie short story collection books. But just what can people expect if they are picking up this book? Is that kind of what you touched on again with the female driven suspense?
Yeah, so the first book, Twisted Reveries, it's all contemporary, so it all takes place, currently. There's a mix of psychological horror as well as supernatural horror. And then the second collection all takes place in a little town, a little fictional town in Minnesota, which is where I live. And then there's also the third book, which is my most recent one that came out. And that all takes place, I call them antique tales. They're sort of pre-World War II. So they all kind of take place then. And I love the short story form, especially in horror, because I feel like it's just a great way to sort of get to know these characters really quickly, throw them in these crazy situations, and play around with the supernatural, play around with maybe unlikable characters that you wouldn't want to read a whole novel about. And that's what Twisted Reveries is. And I've had great success with them. People really seem to like them. Sometimes they're compared to Twilight Zone. I'm a huge Twilight Zone fan. So I kind of like having those twist endings sometimes.
Yes, and you speaking of the fan reception for just those Twisted Reverie books and just your books in general, what have you really heard from readers and fans?
Well, I love to hear that the characters resonate. Daphne, my main character in my novel series, I've had a lot of people be like, hey, that's like me. And that makes me feel good because there are aspects of her that are very much like me, which I think every writer kind of, writes themselves in a way, even if they don't want to admit it. And I've gotten such great feedback. When I'm compared to certain authors, obviously I try not to get too big of a head, but that's always great. And I always kind of remember those reviews. But yeah, people really seem to like the horror aspects, the character aspects. And I really like to sort of build a world that is exciting and thrilling and, of course, scary.
And now you also host a podcast called Horror Rewind. So what
Yeah.
do you talk about on the podcast and what just made you want to start it?
Well, I do that with my best friend, and one of the things that we love that we, have had in common for so long is horror. So we started out wanting to just talk about the horror movies and shows that we watched when we were kids and sort of if they still stand up today, like if they are still as good as we thought they were when we were 8 years old. And it turns out most of them are, but not all of them. So we kind of started with that, but now we're talking more contemporary horror movies and shows. We will watch things and then we just get together and talk. And it's kind of just two best friends talking. We happen to have written a whole series of books on horror movies. So I guess you could say horror movie experts. But it's really just our opinions and kind of just throwing in some concepts here and there. But it's really more fun than anything.
And now if anyone is looking to listen to the podcast or just get any of your books, where is the best place to go?
Sure. So our podcast is anywhere and everywhere. We're on Spotify, we're everywhere you listen to your podcast. And we also have horrorrewind.com. You can go to meghafdahl.com, and that is all my information if you need to contact me, and as well as Amazon. That's where all my books are. And I know that several of my science books are at some chapters stores and in Barnes and Noble here in the States. I was born and raised in Canada, and I love y'all.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Meg.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I really appreciate it.